Good afternoon. I'm Muhammad Tall. I'm a teaching artist for Do More Baltimore, which is an art-centered nonprofit that does social justice poetry in over 46 different clubs, schools, community centers, prisons, group homes, and libraries throughout Baltimore City and County. You can visit us on domorebaltimore.org. That's DEWMORE, Baltimore.org. And on April 16th, you can come and see what we're all about during our yearly festival, which is called Louder Than a Bomb, where we have over 30 different schools, middle and high schools competing. And I'll share a little piece with you guys. Don't you know they praying on your downfall, King? Don't you know that Moses is coming for you, King? Don't you know that I've seen magicians turn servants, staffs turn serpents, pharaohs go preserved, and prophets go unheard, King? So tell me, what's the word, King? Because I've seen man take golden calf for God. And I've seen God rain terror on man for forgetting who God is, King. And God is King. I've seen hollow hearts search for peace on empty prayer rugs. So I suggest you go find one. Because soon, everybody will want a piece of you until there ain't no peace in you, and then they end up piecing you. King, look what they did to Martin Luther. King, they will tell you, we love you. Then Mandela, your spirit, rip you of your heart. But you have Winnie for backbone. You have Betty for backbone. You have Coretta for backbone. So stand strong, King. Because they will try to apartheid your apostle. Claim you as their equal, yet view you as hostile. They will shoot you on sight. King, any sighting of your black frame will be frightening. This is why the caged bird still sings. King, but you ain't caged bird. You more like albatross, King. They keep trying to shoot you down, King. And when they shoot you down, King, they wear you around their necks, King. These mariners ain't got no respect, King. They make crown from thorns until you rule your kingdom. Because they think the king's dumb. That's why I teach my sons, get it, King? Because if you don't, they will guillotine your manhood. Separate you from your mans and your hood. But your hood is kingdom come. Tell them people that the kingdom come, and I plan on raising my seeds, planting ghetto prophets, proposing prophecies, and rewriting policy, teaching future kings to love their struggle. But you oak tree to the rest of these saps. You the leaf, King. I see in your eyes you want to leave, King, but don't forget who you leaving, King. Don't forget the horror. Tell our story like you Stephen, King. Stop letting them appropriate our life here. Stop letting them recreate our nightmares. Somebody tell Iggy the Jigaboo Snow Bunny it ain't funny. Cause I got homies on deathbeds on their last leg trying to remember when enough is enough. Now Blondie trying to play tough but ain't utter a word. When Freddie Gray lost his wings in the streets. You see, everybody want to act black until another black body is left laying in the streets. But acting black and being black are two different things, but I see it in your eyes. You just want to be King, and for that, I'll stand beside you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. You know, I was looking, as I was driving in from DC, I was thinking it's such a really nice day. We're right on the harbor. Is anyone going to be there for the conference? And aren't you glad you stayed? I am so delighted to be here. I'm an education reporter. I cover education and poverty for public radio. And I always think, in past lives, I've covered different beats. And people always say, well, why education? Why have you stuck with education? And I think politics, the environment, city council, you know, any of the other beats I can think of, you know, on those days where you think, why am I doing what I do? Like, with education, all you need to do is go into a classroom and there's a very direct connection, right? It's not like the other beats. And I feel like that's how some of you must feel when you have those moments of total frustration. You can come back to one child you've made a difference in their lives, or one program that you are proud of, and you think, oh my gosh, it's worth it. I've got it for another, I can keep going. And I'm delighted to be here today to talk to 3 fabulous panelists. I know you all have had a lot of conversations, and we use a lot of jargon in this world, best practices and research and scaling up and evidence-based. And now we're going to spend a few minutes talking to 3 young people just about their lives. Very simple, very practical. We're going to kind of have about 20 minutes at the end for questions. So as you hear something you want to know more about of the panelists, feel free to have your question, and then we'll send mics around so you can ask. So I'm going to very briefly introduce the 3 panelists, and then I'm going to let them talk for themselves. But Mohammed Tall, who you just heard from, is from Baltimore via Liberia. He's 18 years old, and he was the former Baltimore's Youth Poet Ambassador. He's performed all over the DMV area, and he says when he's not performing or doing or writing spoken word pieces, he's playing soccer or he's grilling. So thank you for being here. Tekoa Hewitt is from Flint, Michigan. He's 21, and he's at Mott Community College. He's studying math, and eventually he wants to teach math at the college level. And I asked him what his first name, Tekoa, means, and he says, oh, it's some obscure name my parents picked. And I said, Tekoa, you can't get a name more obscure than Kavitha. And finally, we get Shawnice Jackson. She's 28. She's from Baltimore. And she's always been interested in advocacy and mentoring. And right now, she works for the nonprofit Thread that takes the bottom 10% of kids in certain Baltimore schools and provides them intensive mentoring over 10 years to help them turn their life around. And when she is not doing a lot of mentoring and advocacy work across the country, she is doing yoga. So thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit, give us a snapshot of your life. So why don't we start with you, Shawnice?
Sure. So can everyone hear me pretty good? All right, awesome. So like she said, I am from Baltimore here, born and raised here in the city. I was actually born to 2 really young parents. They were teenage parents, and they were actually, they both met their demise at a really young age. So my mother was like an IV heroin user, and she passed away a little bit before my 7th birthday due to complications of HIV that she contracted while she was a heroin addict. My dad was actually the opposite side of the spectrum. He was actually a heroin dealer in Baltimore City, and he was actually killed in West Baltimore due to street violence around the time. I'm actually a little bit shy of my 1st birthday, so the only picture I've actually ever seen of my dad is his obituary. I have 2 younger siblings, a sister and a brother. We're like right behind each other in age. So after my mom after she passed away, unfortunately, like we were kind of split up, and my 2 younger siblings were put into like the foster care system. And fortunately, I had a family member who stepped up and was able to take me. So I was actually raised by my great-grandmother. She's awesome. She actually is the one who kind of like instilled the importance and the value of education in my life. So she made it really clear that if I was going to be there, like I had to go to school. And as soon as I got home from school, like your homework had to be done. Like she made that a priority. I'm really thankful for that. Because of that and her focus on education, I made that my priority. I worked really hard all through schooling, and I feel like I was really privileged and fortunate to be able to have my choice of colleges once I got to that mark. I went to a really expensive private liberal arts college, and I actually ended up working like 2 or 3 jobs just to get through college. Because, like once you're considered like an independent and you're a first generation college student, you don't really like have family members or people who can step up and sign for loans and really guide you through the process. So unfortunately, like right before the start of my senior year of college, I kind of had to like drop out and really focus on working and saving. For the most part, I feel really fortunate that I was able to save and, go back to school. And now I kind of feel like my story has come full circle a little bit. So right now I'm in the position where I not only advocate for young people who come from poverty and who went through some situations who are similar to mine, but I also work on the ground here in Baltimore in the community with young people who are kind of lost or in crisis situations. So right now I actually serve as a case manager at Threat. My formal title is like post-high school individualized services manager. So what that really means is I case manage and I advocate for these young people who have found themselves lost in the post-high school realm and don't really come from a traditional family structure and need a little bit more intensified support. So I really feel like, I've kind of come full circle.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Tekoa.
Well, I guess my story starts out as in a small suburb of Flint, Michigan. I was born to 2 working-class parents, and I had a twin brother. In school, I didn't do particularly well, average at best. And I guess I had, and my parents provided me with everything that they could, and they did a good job of giving me support. When I was 16, my twin brother passed away of brain bleed because he, as a child, was diagnosed with severe hemophilia B, which is a bleeding disorder which doesn't allow you to clot properly. And so he had an accident and was not able to receive treatment. During this time, my parents were out on vacation, and so I was left with my elderly grandma to try to deal with the situation. 8 hours passed, and I had a doctor inform me that there was nothing that they could do for him, and he was a vegetable. I stayed there all night, and my parents finally came in the morning with a police escort, and I had to break the news to them. It was a difficult time in my life at that point. I dropped out of school. I turned to not the most productive things to do for a young person. I started drinking and doing things like that to try to deal with the loss. I started working full-time on Flint's East Side, working 2 jobs to try to support myself. Shortly after that, my parents divorced, and I tried to find my way through the conventional 9 to 5, and then 5 to 8 working hours. I found after a delivery driver of mine, because I worked at a pizza place, after he got robbed, because we worked in a pretty dangerous neighborhood, I guess. The crime rate in Flint is already exceptionally high, and the place that I worked in was not a great area. It was in the projects, essentially, and we weren't allowed to really go by ourselves outside without, having somebody kind of look out for us, And so after my friend who was a delivery driver got robbed, I just figured in my mind that I couldn't continue to live this life anymore. I couldn't continue to live every day in the same kind of situation, the same kind of poverty, the same kind of lack of opportunity. And so I decided that I wanted to better myself and go back to school. And so I decided to enroll in the Gateway to College program at Mott Community College. That gave me a chance to earn my high school diploma and college credits at the same time. And so I found myself, I think, through that program. I started to discover that I felt whole, committing myself to service. And so shortly after, I started volunteering for youth in the area, trying to tutor kids that needed help with math and science and writing. Because the literacy rates in Flint are astoundingly low. We have one community in Flint that has a 40% literacy rate. So any help that anyone could give helps the residents. And now recently with the Flint water crisis, all of our issues are coming to a forefront. There are people who can't shower, people who can't drink the water, people who have to go outside of the city to just obtain clean drinking water, people who have to leave just to get a shower, you know. Things that we take for granted every day aren't available to most residents in the city. So I've tried to dedicate my time to assisting those in the city that need my help any way that I can.
That's great. Thank you. And Mohammed, tell us a little bit about your story.
For me, I was born in Guinea, West Africa, and my parents we moved around quite a bit because that was towards the end of the African Civil War that was going on there. So I moved to Sierra Leone, and then we moved to Gambia, and then from Gambia we moved to America. Both of my parents are Liberian, and so when we came here, I had two older siblings that were already in the States. So my mom's major reason for coming to America was to kind of like get them back because they were born towards the beginning of the war. So after she got them back, we all kind of got our situation together. I began to go into an Islamic school in College Park, Maryland. And from there, I sort of kind of started lashing out because I didn't really understand where it was that I fit in the world. Because when I was in public school, the struggle was that I was African. So everybody has the jokes like, oh, you guys live in huts made out of mud and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I look back now and I laugh at it, but at that time it was really detrimental to it's really scarring. And when I went to Islamic school, it was like, you're the only, like, there's other Africans here, but you're still different. Because they're from the east side of Africa. They don't even consider themselves African half the time. So it was
we find so many ways to divide ourselves.
Exactly. And so that created its own struggle. So I had to find my own way to sort of like, even though I was different in that aspect, I needed a way to kind of stand out. So I turned to like sneakers. So I started buying a lot of shoes and stuff like that because that was the only way I could really express myself because you have a uniform. People tell you when you can do this, when you can't do that. And from there, I kind of became like a rebel without a cause at that point. I thought I was like Tupac or something. Like, yeah, like I used to like be at recess, I would be like rapping and stuff like that. Like I was always writing poetry and things like that. But I didn't know what was driving me to do these things, but I was just lashing out. So at one point, my 9th grade year, I got on the intercom and like said something crazy like throughout the whole school. I was like, now paging Brother Harun, now paging Brother Harun, and like stuff like that. And I didn't know.
What did it mean?
My principal's name was Brother Harun, so I was saying now paging. Brother, so I was like, now, yeah. So I'm paging. So I thought the phone didn't work, and so like I was. So I used to get in trouble for like the darndest things, and things like that. And eventually, in my 10th grade year, I was kicked out of the school, and so I had to complete the year as like basically like a homeschool student. And in that time, I had a lot of time to reflect because like I saw my mom at like her most vulnerable point because she was even though my father's in my life, she was a single mother paying like $16,000 a year for like me and my 2 brothers to go to the school. And for her, it was like all this hard work I put in to try to keep you in this like structured situation and you just don't want to be here. And so my 11th grade year, I went to Woodlawn High School, and I kind of found myself there in a, I forgot what it's called, theater arts class. And I was able to express myself in any way. Like, I could do my different, like, voices. Like, I could talk in the African accent, like, how are you today? Like, things like that, right? Like, and I could do that, and I could feel comfortable when people accept me for it. And my mentor actually used to aid in the class, and he did a poem for us one day. And I said, yo, I used to do that. I used to do poetry. And so the next week we had a drill, and I did a poem, and like the whole class was like, oh my God, you're so good. And from there, I was introduced to the poetry aspect. And through poetry, I was given the outlet to kind of like express all the feelings that I felt in all these different situations. And I was able to build off of that and find my own voice within my own community.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested. I'm interested in asking you all to look back, and when you started to go off track, or when you wanted to when you dropped out at that point, what could someone have said, or could there have been a type of person in your life, or could there have been a program, like what might have helped keep you on track and not have that kind of, where you had to kind of take a detour and then get back? What would have changed? Shanice?
For me, I feel really fortunate to have found a program to, help me at that time.
You found them, or they found you?
I found them.
You found
definitely.
them. Okay.
There wasn't like any type of like outreach or recruitment. I actually was, when I dropped out of school, I was basically working full time, and the job that I found, I was kind of like doing research, and I was working with young people, but I felt really, stifled by, how controlled data is, and how I was basically, I was working with young people in Baltimore City schools, and basically hearing all their issues, collecting all this data, but not really feeling like I could really have a true effect on the situation, or change the things that they were going through. So I really started looking for, I feel like I Googled opportunities to serve or ways to help out in my community, and I came across an AmeriCorps opportunity through Public Allies Maryland. So Public Allies Maryland is based out of University of Maryland School of Social Work, and not only did Public Allies give me an opportunity to work in the community through a community-based nonprofit, but one day a week when we weren't at our placements, we were at the University of Maryland School of Social Work going through leadership development trainings, really learning the soft skills, and I feel like I had all the skills to be considered a leader, but it wasn't until I actually went through the Public Allies program that I actually had someone call me a leader, or really point it out.
You
and
had
then
the confidence or external validation.
Absolutely, from
That's
that
fabulous.
program, and walked away from Public Allies not only feeling like a leader and feeling really clear, my skill sets are best leveraged as an advocate, but also prepared for life and able to go back to school through the help of the Education Award. So definitely.
And is the program represented in the room? It made a difference. That's awesome. Tikoa, tell me what was it about your life? Oops.
Well, I guess one thing that would have, helped me had I known about more comprehensive programs before, because I don't think that many of us hear about comprehensive programs like Youth Build or Gateway to College or AmeriCorps until we're already so down on our luck that we feel like there's, hardly any options, And I think the way that a lot of people like myself can recover is knowing that there are supportive people out there in the community that do want to help people like myself, and provide the support that is necessary for young people to escape poverty. So I think that somebody telling me that, that you are better than this and that you can do more with your life is really important. And that's what you get through a lot of these comprehensive programs. That's what I got through the Gateway to College program. They said that, you can do more than what you have been. They pushed me to try to be the best person that I could be. And for that, I'm ever grateful, I can't believe the person that I was back then to who I am now, And that's what their government funding goes to. That's what these taxes are going to support these local programs. That's what these donations are doing. Is they're helping people like Shawnice and myself really get a whole identity of who we are as people. So I think having access to comprehensive program and the knowledge that these programs exist is something that would help.
Mm-hmm. Mohammed, what about you?
I think for me, the biggest thing I was missing when coming up was an outlet. In African households, we normally sweep everything under the rug, and after a certain while, everything comes out, and not in the best of ways. So I felt like Do More provided that outlet for me. I'll never forget one of my mentors, Kenneth Morrison, the CEO of Do More. I was reading him a poem, and I said, so-and-so said this, and he said, why do you need to say that? Why can't you say it? Your words are just as valid as his. And that changed my entire outlook on this world, because I felt as though I was being stifled to the point where it was like who I wasn't who the world wanted me to be. And I feel like that's what happens too much. Like, we're broken down, we're crushed down to the point where we feel like we have to assimilate to the things that we consider orthodox in our society. And for me, I was never willing to assimilate, and I felt like these programs helped me recognize my true potential and who I was, and that it was okay to be who I am. So.
And not just that, that you have something to offer as well,
exactly.
right? Before we open it up to questions, I'm wondering, during your lowest points, what did you tell yourself? That always helps me, I feel, to have some kind of mantra or some kind of, so when I do interviews, I often ask that.
Yeah. Oh, you want to start with me? Well, after I got kicked out of school, I was watching ESPN. I don't know why I was watching TV, but...
Your mother allowed you to watch ESPN.
Yeah,
I thought you would have cut it off after that.
I was watching ESPN, and I'll never forget, it was the end of a 30-30 episode, and the quote was, "Adversity introduces a man to himself." And I never forgot that quote. So I felt like everything I was going through was happening for a reason, and certainly it did. So.
What about you, Takoa?
Well, when I was down, I always told myself that it'll get better. There's a lot of people that think I'm stuck in this position, that I'm never going to be able to reach out and get the help that I need. And so I told myself that, hey, it's going to get better. I found that, looking inside and saying who I am now, and I analyzed my behavior at the time, and I think, well, this isn't who I want to be, and I just kind of set a goal for myself that this is who I am now, but that's not who I'm going to be in the future. And so I told myself that, I can be who I want to be. We live in, I think, the best country in the world, that we have the opportunity to be able to make who we want out of ourselves. So.
Shawnice?
So I'm a Christian and I'm a believer in Christ, so I firmly believe like he that began a great work in you, he will complete it. And I just remember like being younger and, thinking like what type of just God would put me here and then, take away my parents and then not allow that to be used for a greater good. So just trying to, be persistent and just keep in my head, like, I'm not going through this, like, for me. I know I'm going through this, like, for somebody else. I know, like, this story and this testimony is going to help somebody else, is going to free somebody else. Like, someone needs to know, like, how I survived the things that I went through, like, for the most part.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I always think when my mantra is baby steps, I always want to, do something huge or something seems insurmountable, and sometimes it's just like, baby steps, and you will eventually get there. So I want to open it up to questions. Can the two folks with the mics just like raise your hand so people can see you? Okay. Someone at the back, someone over here. And if you have questions, raise your hand. While we're waiting, because we don't have anyone as yet. Oh!
Hi, my name is Adrian Clutter from Montgomery County, Maryland. And the question I want to ask is, If you had a chance to speak to all my staff who are working on these frontline programs today, what's one thing that you would want to tell them?
That's a great question.
I think I would tell the people on your staff to
Before you say that, I want to just jump in. So know that everyone works with, like in this room probably, works with staff that are, you know, in the nonprofit sector. So overworked, underpaid, long hours, right? I work for a nonprofit too, so I totally feel you. Right. So these are people who got into this work to make a huge difference, and sometimes some days are just really hard. So what would you say?
I would say
I just felt I need to qualify it.
no, that's fine. I would definitely say to be empathic and be compassionate towards your young people. I feel like a lot of the times, like, we can put on like this front and like this armor, like everything is good, like we have things figured out, but then, you know, be leaving work and, you know, not knowing where I'm going to like rest my head that night, or, you know, like not knowing how I'm going to go about paying my bills, but to like be really mindful and considerate and compassionate towards these young people, because everyone is like fighting a battle that you can't really see.
Well, what I would say is keep fighting. I think in this line of work, people get fatigued. I mean, that's just natural. In any line of work, people get fatigued. But without impactful adults that want to make a difference, there's so many of us that'll fall through the cracks, you know, and I just would say keep fighting, because we rely on all of you. You know, the work you all do is very, very important, and it changes lives. You know, you may have days where you may not see the impact that it makes, or you may think that it's just another day at the office. But for young people like us, those are the days that'll change our lives.
Yeah.
Mohammed?
I kind of have like two things. The first one is it's a slow grind. Like, nothing's going to happen overnight. Nothing's going to change overnight. It's a process. So as long as you constantly remind yourself of why it is you're doing what it is you're doing, you should be good, hopefully. My second thing is that you should never view yourself as different from those that you're helping. So.
That's very interesting. Do we have another question?
Good afternoon. My name is Christina Drusha-Williams from the Governor's Office for Children here in Maryland, and I'm an alumni of Public Allies Maryland, and I served alongside with Shawnice. And so my question for the panel, and again, thank you for being here and for sharing your stories, and my question's about stories. How do we make sure that your stories and stories of your peers are heard, not just in this room, but in front of with policymakers and with people who are designing programs? So how can we support you and your peers in sharing your stories, your opinions, your ideas, your voices?
You want to start with me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I go through this a lot, I have to say, because I'm often looking for stories, right? I'm a journalist, and there are so many issues from people feel a lot of, young people are already feeling self-conscious, then you feel like your circumstances are different from others. There's a lot of shame. There's not wanting to put, they might not be at the stage y'all are at. And so how would you suggest doing that? Because I think when you share stories, it touches people in a way research, just statistics just can't. Mohammed?
Okay. For me, I think it's not so much so it's not so much so who it is you're telling your story. Like, if I was reciting a poem for Barack Obama, if I was reciting it for 5-year-olds at the kindergarten class, like, it's going to be the exact same thing, because we want to be heard, right? I feel like as youth in these different organizations and stuff like that, or who are coming underneath these organizations, you just want to be heard. It doesn't matter who, but you want to know that your voice and what you have to say means something. So I don't really think it has to do with the platform. Like, that comes over time. But I feel so much as though it starts with you, right? If you give them that ear that they need, and it begins from there, basically.
You would have liked the opportunity, or you
Just
do
to be
like the
heard.
opportunity, right?
Everybody just wants to be heard. It doesn't matter who. Just hear what they have to say.
What about you, Tekoa?
Well, to kind of continue off Muhammad's saying, he was looking for an outlet, essentially. And I think a lot of times by you being interested, that's all a young person needs, because so often in their life they don't have people that are interested. So I think just giving them that outlet, either through just a conversation with you or advocating for some kind of issue that's important to them, I think that just providing an outlet for those young people to share their stories is important.
Shanice?
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those. Kind of build off of like what Muhammad was saying. I definitely agree that young people really want to be heard. I think we have to work towards equipping young people to be able to tell their stories, and also allowing them a safe space and environment to do so. So, like really trying to like rethink the way we engage young people, not just giving a young person like a seat at the table or a spot on the panel, like just to check off a box. So like really moving from like this idea of like tokenism, like just having a young person there just to say you had a young person there, but really authentically engaging the young person and, kind of like coaching them, like be willing to put in the time, like to get them to the space and to the point where they feel able.
And they can, yeah. I wanted to piggyback off her question, and I forgot. It'll come back. Any?
Hi.
Oh.
Sarah Hollister from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Jeff's Human Services.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sarah, I'm usually too loud, so that's okay. Sarah Hollister from Jeff's Human Services in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thank you for coming and speaking with us. You talked a little bit about the fact that you found out about programs, and there are a lot of great programs out there, but maybe if you had found out about a program sooner, or maybe if you could have referred your friend to a program. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how we, practitioners who have programs, best match those programs to the young folks and get the word out.
Sorry, question.
What is the best way to match programs that are out there with young people? Is that the question? Did I hear you right?
And also just get the word out. There are a lot of people who don't know
what would be a good way
there.
to get the word out? That's
I think not being afraid to actually interact with young people and actually go where they are. Like
that would be a good first step.
Yeah, like I feel like a lot of times like we want young people to sign up for things and to get excited about them, and then the young person, like has never heard of it, or like they've never seen any type of advertising. So not being afraid to like go where young people are, to go into the neighborhoods, to go into the communities, or appoint like ambassadors or champions from your organization, from your program, to go out and be that voice and get young people excited about it and engage with it.
Yeah, I agree with Shawnee's that, we have to put boots on the ground where there are, young people, right? Basketball courts, rec centers, places where kids want to hang out, and that way we can catch these young people before they fall through the cracks, right? I think it's important, to have some kind of media presence too, because most millennials, most young people now are running to technology quicker than ever before, right? Muhammad was watching ESPN when he saw a quote, right, that changed his life, okay? So I think being media savvy also helps connect young people with comprehensive organizations that can help them.
Muhammad?
Speaking from like the standpoint of a younger person, well, not that young, but we're not gonna care until you make us care. And you can't make us care if you don't show us you care. Mm-hmm. So it takes these different organizations coming into the schools, coming into the after-school programs, rec centers, things like that, and showing us that it's not a one-time thing. Like, you're going to be here. I know, because now I teach in 2 different middle schools, and the first time I went to my second middle school, we do an affirmation circle at the end of our workshops, and we have the kids or the youth. We have them affirm somebody in the circle for something that they did throughout the workshop. And one of the students affirmed me, and he said, "Thank you for being here." and that changed like my entire outlook on everything I was doing. Like everything that I've done, everywhere that I've been, it meant nothing compared to that moment. So.
Do you think that when you were younger and you all were struggling, that people recognized your strengths? A lot of times, we say at risk, like lowest performing, like we've got all these tags, but the kids come with a lot of strengths. And I'm just curious, did people recognize your strengths?
Yeah. For me, I had a teacher in 9th grade. He was my homeroom teacher. He always used to tell me, he would say, brother, you have such good leadership qualities that you choose to use them on bad. Like, that's what he was always telling me. So I think he really pushed the idea that I had the qualities and the characteristics to really to move the dynamic of because it wasn't like it was only me. It was like my entire class. Like we were just rowdy. So it was like
you were just the ringleader.
Exactly. That's what they said. But I had the ability to switch the dynamic of the class. But I think I didn't really see that till later on.
Right. Tikoa?
Yeah, I had some people growing up that said, hey, you can do a lot if you put your mind to it, and I think that's all it takes is to have one adult say that you can do something, more than what you think you can, And I think sometimes when we're getting caught up in maybe even just the primary educational system, that the teachers kind of are fatigued and they don't necessarily identify these strengths in some of their students. They might not be the best academically, but maybe they have other strengths that are useful, right? I think with being ready by 21, maybe not everybody will have a college diploma, but everybody has skills that will make them productive in society, right? We all have things about us that, there's some things that Muhammad can do that I can't do. I'm not an artist, but, there's a lot of individual traits and skills that we all have that if just someone recognizes that could make the difference in a young person.
Shonice?
I definitely feel like I didn't consider myself a leader or really know what my assets truly were until I went through this Public Allies AmeriCorps program. I feel like it not only, so basically Public Allies operates from like a ABCD model, so asset-based community development, but before you're actually out organizing in these communities looking for their assets, you go through like a series of trainings and leadership development series to kind of pick out like the assets that you have within you. So I feel like not until I actually knew what these assets were, had the terminology to attach to them, and have like a mentor, someone who was basically calling out things that I couldn't like readily see. It was it was so different for me. I feel like no one in my family or none of my friends or anything like that, they could tell me like what I was good at, but I feel like I didn't really have the terminology, and I really didn't have the confidence to believe in it until I went through this program.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jim McLaughlin. I'm representing Beyond the Bell from Milwaukee, and I'm a former middle school teacher. And I worked very, very hard in my classroom. I wanted to make sure every kid's potential was unlocked, and it's a hard thing to do. And the harder I worked, the more I realized that that wasn't really the most pressing need that my students had. As you guys were just mentioning there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of fatigue, and there's a lot of pressure on some of the things that may or may not have been the most important for the kids I was trying to serve. So you've all kind of discussed what your experience in school was like. I'm fortunate now where I'm in a space where I get to make grants for programs that work out of the classroom that are kind of free of the restrictions that a lot of educators have during the school hours. So I'd like to know, what were the things or the experiences or the skills or the relationships that you really only could get when you weren't in school between the bells? What were the things that it really took outside efforts, not just your regular school day, to activate what was in you?
Let me make sure that I've understood the question. What are some of the outside skills, apart from academic, what are some of the skills they learned in school that...
Well, out of the school day, yeah. So during
school.
the school day, there's a lot of structure. It's out of school time that really requires a lot of the structure.
Okay.
Or at least the
what are the skills that you learned outside the kind of regular academic day? And You said you make grants?
Yeah, well, I do.
So the money will flow that way, so be careful and think about your answer.
I mean, it might have been, this is where I met the group of friends that I felt like I belonged, or this is where I learned I loved this skill or this activity, or it might have been that I found I was a leader. And actually, if I can ask you to think younger than just when you're 18, I mean, I was a middle school teacher, and I'm trying to think of the things that my little kids, my 12-year-olds, needed that I really hope that they get when they left the school building.
So from the time I was in middle school until like college, I was on a STEP team, and I feel like being a part of the STEP team really, allowed me to, one, know what it meant to like be a part of a team, be a true team player. I feel like being on the team really taught me the importance of accountability and being like, true to your word. And also just how to communicate with like diverse types of people, all of these things that I feel like are really essential to what I do now as an advocate, as well as like in my everyday, like day to day on the ground, like my day job here in the city.
Well, I think the thing that I learned outside of the classroom, that a skill that I learned was when I was working part-time first at a pizza place on the east side. We had this glass bulletproof little wall right there that had like a broken speaker in it. So I had to learn good communication skills because I'd have one ear up to the glass and then like, what? What, you wanted pepperoni on that? And then, and so I had to learn good communication skills. I had to learn how to manage my time effectively because I was like one guy. I had to flip pizzas, answer the phone, go to the cash register, deal with a delivery driver who didn't get a good tip. And so I just had to learn effective communication skills and be able to apply those in a practical setting. So,
for me, a quote that came to my head when he was saying that is a Jay-Z quote. He says, "You can go to school, but you can't buy class." And so for me, I felt like I gained a lot of my knowledge through hip hop. I would always listen to like very lyrical artists and decode every single sentence and learn, like if I heard a new word like Abu Ghraib or something like that, like, or a term like that, and I'll go and Google and research it and figure out what does that mean, why is it that's what he chose to say in that particular sentence. So I know everything is like art derived for me or whatever, but yeah, I'm an artist, that's what we do.
That's great. I think we have time for one more quick question, if there is one. Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Kim Newberry, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan, Don Bosco Hall. And my question is, if you could think of your 17-year-old self, one thing that keeps me up at night is we can do these dynamic programs when you come after school, but you still have to go home. And sometimes that home environment is not the best, or there are parents that really have an interest in trying to better communicate with their teenagers, and specifically teenagers. What would, as your 17-year-old self, what would you tell your parent or your grandmother, great-grandmother, how to better help you at that age? What would have been your advice? I wish you would have done this.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just want to be clear, make sure I'm understanding the question. Advice to my parents when I was 17, like what would have helped me
when you
at
were
that
17,
time?
what could your families have done to better support you?
For me, I feel like just helping me make a smart decision around my post-secondary, like what am I going to do, like in terms of higher education. I feel like, being a first-generation college student, like navigating that whole world without like a mentor or without having any experience or any knowledge is extremely difficult. Not just, navigating the financial aid and the FAFSA process, but like, thinking about like long-term financial planning, like what can I afford, like not just my first year of college, but like 4 years down the road, like what school, what university, what institution should I go to? Maybe it's not like a 4-year thing. Maybe I should do like community college for 2 years and then, branch out.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely in terms of like, what does it look like to make smart decisions in terms of higher education?
I'd have to agree with exactly everything Shawnee said, because my parents never went to college, and so they were like, hey, you need to go to college to get a job, but, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what I wanted to do, what interested me, and so I think them having a little bit more interest, I guess, in some things that interest me academically would probably have helped me.
Well, for me, that was like last year. So, but from my background, being African, like everybody's supposed to be. It's a collectivist. Like we have a collectivist mentality, but it's also you have to be independent as well. So a lot of the things that I had to do to prepare for college, I had to do on my own, as far as like FAFSA, applying to different schools and things like that, and it becomes overwhelming at a certain point because when you're writing those essays, you like, I'd rather go to community college. Like this is annoying. So I felt like if my parents would have been like more involved as far as just trying to like make sure I was on top of things rather than me just having to force myself to be on top of things, it would have made the process a little less daunting. But I'm in college, so I'm good. Yeah.
Thank you so much to the panelists. This has been like such a thoughtful discussion. I always end my talks or panel discussions or whatever it is by talking about a sign I have in my office, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of you. It says, "A society will be judged by how it treats its last, its least, and its littlest." And I just think that is so much of the work you do, and so I wanted to share it. And the second thing I wanted to say was, I've been looking over Tekoa's head, and there's this change the odds sign. And I do a series every year where I highlight kids who have come from very difficult circumstances, but have beaten the odds. So the series is called Beating the Odds. And after seeing that sign, I thought to myself, we expect so much of young people. We put so much pressure on them to beat the odds. And that sign made me think, oh my God, that's so true. What all of us are trying to do, really, all of you are trying to do, is change the odds. And I think that's so much more inspiring. So thank you very much for being with us. I really am delighted to have spoken to you all. Thank you. Thank you.
That was absolutely wonderful. And Kavitha, we appreciate the fact that you noticed changing the odds. That really is what we're about. I know we're all ready to get out of here, and just wanted to, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for really hanging in there with us over what's becoming almost 3 days of thinking and working. And for those of you who read this was the blog series that I did in getting ready for the conference, because I knew I wasn't going to have time to do a big keynote, I used this idea of sort of making the invisible visible. And that's really what we have been trying to do together over the past couple of days. And so quickly, because I like to alliterate, I've got a list of Ds, the things that I heard. With the policy panel this morning, when the question came out, what is it that we need to do to sustain this work across administrations, especially when they change? They said increased demand, right? It's our job to demand this stuff and not to just assume that because we put something in place, it's going to stay in place. It stays in place because we demand it. We've heard over and over again about the importance of data. We've heard specific comments about the need to disaggregate data, but we've also really heard the value of using data to discover the root causes that are behind what's going on in communities, in neighborhoods, with specific populations, and then documenting those causes, and documenting them in the voices of young people and adults and folks who are authentic members of those communities. We've heard the word diversity. And it was really, you all are an aggressive crowd, and you didn't let us get away with anything. And so when you looked at the screen and you didn't see what you thought was the right mix yesterday in those slides, you said, wait a minute. If this is really about, addressing inequity, we needed to see more of those applications coming from communities that we know need these good schools. So what's going on there? So diversity has got to be there as an issue, and that's racial and ethnic diversity, it's income diversity, it's age diversity. We have to continue to push that and look for it and expect it and challenge it when we don't see it. We've talked a lot about the need to improve delivery. Not just change policy, but trace it all the way down to the ground and make sure that it's consistently happening. And you've had lots of sessions that have really talked about what happens when you have shortfalls when we don't go all the way down, but also the exciting things that can happen when we really do not force but inspire people who want to do better, because as Kavitha said, in this sector, whether you're on the public side or the nonprofit side, we're here because we are usually passionate about what we're doing. But having the appropriate challenges, having what we're beginning to call sort of right stakes accountability that turns into incentives for doing better and being able to deliver better is important. And then, of course, this is all about development. And this panel was absolutely amazing in explaining to you and really breaking down what it really takes to support development, and the fact that development doesn't magically end at 18, but really talking about those skills and those supports. Your questions were wonderful about, when young people are at their lowest, do people see that they have strengths? Do they feel that they have strengths? Wonderful, wonderful quotes around what it takes to actually help young people know that they have skills and name them and know that those skills are valuable. So a terrific discussion about development, which reinforces the main theme that we know what we have to do is constantly challenge the idea that what we have to do is fix before we develop. It has to be flipped around. People don't just want to be fixed at any age. We have to develop in order to fix. And when we really invest in developing young people, not only do they fix themselves, they fix their communities, and that means that we have a chance of eliminating that phrase that was said that if your zip code is your destiny. Well, the only way to do that is to give young people a sense of agency so that they can be advocates and not only improving themselves so that they beat the odds, but that they come back and are advocates for changing the odds in their communities. So with that, I send you all back out to continue to change the odds. I thank you all for being here with us, and we hope to see you again next year. Have a great time.